All right, today we are digging into a really fascinating piece of academic research that gets to the heart of how our digital lives are, well, literally reshaping our minds. We live in this incredible information age, right? Data is everything. But what happens when that fire hose of information is pointed directly at us 24/7? Let's get into it.
I mean, you know this feeling. I know this feeling. It's that sense that you're just buried under a mountain of emails, notifications, and an endless social media scroll. It gets hard to focus, hard to think clearly. Well, it turns out that feeling has a name, and it has a very real cost.
And what a cost it is. We're talking $900 billion. That's what information overload is estimated to cost the U.S. economy every single year. And that's not just some abstract number on a spreadsheet. No, that represents real lost productivity. And it represents work stress that leads to very tangible health problems. So the big takeaway here is that this isn't just you feeling stressed. This is a massive economic and public health issue.
So here's the game plan for today. We're going to look at how we got here, define what this digital drain really is, see how scientists even measure it, and then check out a really cool comparison across two different cultures. Finally, and most importantly, we'll look at how we can all start to take back control.
First up, the age of overload. So how on earth did we get buried in all this data? Well, it definitely didn't happen overnight. It was more like a slow build that suddenly hit hyperspeed, and it completely changed our relationship with information itself.
You know, this idea isn't brand new. Way back in 1956, a psychologist named George Miller suggested our brains have a limited bandwidth, a finite processing capacity. Then, in the 90s, research confirmed it. They found that your performance on a task actually gets worse once you're given too much information. Then, the 2000s hit, bam, Web 2.0, social media, that trickle of info became a tidal wave. And that brings us right to today, where that smartphone in your pocket means you are connected, always, everywhere, with no off switch.
Now, to really study something like this, you've got to have clear language. So let's look at a couple of key terms researchers use to give a name to all this noise.
So, first, you have information overload. The best way to think about this is to imagine your brain is a computer CPU. If you open too many apps and tabs at once, what happens? It slows down, it starts to lag, it might even freeze completely. That is exactly what information overload is for your brain. The input just exceeds your mental horsepower.
And then there's a related concept, problematic internet use, or PIU for short. This is kind of the behavioral side of the coin. It's when using the internet becomes compulsive, something that's really hard to control, and it starts messing with your real-life responsibilities and relationships. And the study suggests that information overload is a huge driver of PIU, trapping us in this cycle of just constantly seeking out more and more information.
This brings us back to that really critical idea of a threshold. Researchers talk about something called the inverted U-curve. Just picture a graph, okay? As you get more information, your performance and understanding go up and up and up, but then you hit a peak. After that peak, if you keep piling on more info, your performance doesn't just level off. No, it takes a nosedive. It proves pretty dramatically that more is not always better. In fact, past a certain point, more info makes you dumber.
Okay, this model looks complex, but it's really cool because it maps out the whole process. Let's just follow one path. Look over on the far left. You've got the things that cause it, like the sheer amount of information. These things lead to that central box, the feeling of being overloaded. But check out the arrows coming from the top and bottom. Things like being under time pressure make it feel worse, while your own personal coping strategies can make it feel better. All of that then leads to what you actually do, like hiding posts or unfollowing people. And those actions lead to the final consequences on the right, like feeling dissatisfied or losing trust in the platform. It just shows you it's a whole interconnected system, not just one single thing.
All right, so we get what information overload is, but how in the world do you measure its impact on something as personal and complex as our well-being? How do you put a number on a person's mental state?
Well, this is where a scientific framework called the DRIVE model comes into play. You can see from the diagram, it's basically a tool that helps researchers connect the dots between things like the demands of your job, your personal resources, and your actual health outcomes. Instead of just looking at one piece of the puzzle, it gives them a way to see how all these different things interact to create your overall sense of well-being.
The real genius of the DRIVE model is how it connects everything. It looks at you, your personality, your resilience. It looks at the outside world, your work demands. It considers the stuff in the middle, like stress. And then it links all of that to the final score, your actual health and how happy you are with your job.
Its real strength is that it's simple but also super flexible, so researchers can use it to study anyone from nurses to college students.
Now we get to one of the most interesting parts of this whole study. They didn't just look at one group of people. No, they compared students and workers in two totally different countries, the UK and Kuwait, to see if our culture actually changes how we experience the internet.
So this table uses a really famous framework to map out cultural values. And just look at the differences. But the one to really focus on for this study is individualism. The UK has one of the highest scores in the world, meaning the focus is really on me and my immediate family. Kuwait, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's a highly collectivistic society built around tight-knit, extended family and social groups.
So here is the fascinating result of that difference. The research found that in a collectivistic culture like Kuwait's, when you're stressed out, it's just expected that your social network will jump in and support you. It's a given. But in an individualistic culture like the UK's, the whole dynamic is flipped on its head. There, a lack of social support is actually seen as a primary cause of stress. It's a brilliant example of how the exact same tool, the internet, can work in completely different ways depending on the culture you're in.
Okay, now that we've seen how it works and how culture plays a role, let's zoom back out and talk about the real, tangible consequences this digital drain has on all of us every day.
And the list of negative impacts is pretty long. We've got the obvious ones, like more stress and anxiety. But then there's something called attention deficit trait, or ADT. Now, this is not the same as clinical ADHD. That's really important to say. It's a state that's induced by overload, where you just can't stay organized or set priorities. Then there's analysis paralysis, that feeling of being so swamped with information that you can't make any decision at all. And at work, all this adds up to lower job satisfaction, being more impatient, and, yep, a measurable drop in the quality of what you produce.
So where is all this problematic use happening? Well, a diary study of users who struggled with this gave a pretty clear answer. Almost 60% of their activity was on social media. After that came general web browsing, and then online gaming. It really highlights that, for this group, social media platforms are the main arena where this battle for control is being lost.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty bleak. I get it. But the good news is the research doesn't just point out the problem, it also points towards some real solutions. So let's talk about how we can actually start to take back control from this digital drain.
The research basically boils it down to 3 key things we can do. First, it starts with us. Good old-fashioned self and time management. That just means consciously setting clear goals for what you want to achieve, which helps create focus and tune out the noise. Second is to build up our information literacy. This is a critical life skill now. It means learning how to tell what's valuable information and what's just junk. And third, we've got to use technology to fight technology. That means using filters, ad blockers, and just being smarter about how we search, to actively cut down the flood of information coming at us.
But maybe the biggest and most important solution is just awareness. The research had this one finding that just blew my mind. When they asked a group of students about information overload, they got blank stares. The students had never even heard of the concept. That tells you everything. The very first step is just putting a name to this feeling and understanding that being overwhelmed isn't some personal failure. It's a predictable result of the world we live in.
And that really leaves us with this one big question. Information is an incredible tool. It can do amazing things. But like any powerful tool, you have to handle it with skill and with intention. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. In your own digital life, are you in control of the tool, or is the tool in control of you? Thanks for tuning in.